Hey, Sam, we're just waiting on other folks to join in.
Hi. Was a little difficult to puzzle out how to get into this meeting because normally we're sent an invitation. And in this case, there was just a link to the to a website, which when you click that link, you could register. So anyway, I found it.
Yeah, I'm glad. We unfortunately had to add more security measures after our unfortunate mishap last week.
Sorry, Daniel.
No worries. We also have John Duell running a couple minutes late, so we should be getting started. I think Ryan confirmed that he should be able to make it, so we'll let folks get through this registration process and get on here.
Can I just remark that it might have been useful to warn people that this was a new procedure and give them instructions as to how to navigate it? Would have helped me.
Yeah, thanks for your feedback, Marge. Appreciate it. Yeah, it looks like Ryan's working to get on here.
If we have a second, so just to be clear, this registration process is now how we're going to deal with all of our meetings?
Likely so. Our IT experts have been weighing in on our security measures that we need to take after last week's Zoom incident during the work group meeting, and registration is the unfortunate cost of that. So far that's what we have, but I haven't been told that it'll be for every single meeting, but certainly right now that's the approach. All right, so I think Ryan's coming on here shortly. So let's go ahead and get started. We're now in this point where draft 3 has been released. Obviously, you've all probably had a chance to see it, and we're essentially going to be kind of working on building the content from that draft 3, going through suggested changes that individual work group members make, which I'll be compiling into this document unchanged. And then during our discussion, the idea is that we're going to go through those changes and essentially accept or revise those suggested edits as a group. And that way, at the end of each meeting, we should have sort of a new document to be working from. So we'll all have kind of be on the right trajectory to build on the conversations that we've had so far. Hey, Ryan, thanks for coming on.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize the extra step.
No, thanks for enduring that. I appreciate it. We're just talking, it's an unfortunate added security measure after the last Zoom issues during the work group meeting last week. Okay, so I'll be pulling up this document shortly, and we'll essentially be going through the different changes, going through any suggestions that folks have made during the in-between meetings. And then by the end of the meeting, the goal is to have kind of a new, fresh version to be building on for the upcoming drafts. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our agenda as well. Yes.
I'm on the agenda right now. Are we looking at the blah blah work group report draft number 3, 123?
So we're actually gonna work from I'll pull it up on my screen.
Okay.
We'll work from the full work group draft rather than like our subcommittee's draft. And the goal here is that, you know, we don't want to see any changes between the work group draft and the subcommittee's product. It's all going to be essentially a kind of redlined version of what we're working from. And that's the goal, is that the full work group report reflects exactly what we're talking about in the subcommittee, as opposed to sort of the clean version approach that we've taken so far. All right, so let's go ahead and go through. We are going to review the subcommittee report portion of our full kind of work group document, and then we also want to go into key findings and key recommendations, because I think at this point it's good to nail down what that looks like. Last time we got suggestions from the group that they should be kind of summarized. We had a lot of kind of the bullet point copy and paste from our subcommittee report into these key findings, key recommendations. So we had a chance to revise that. Marin did an incredible job of summarizing those and putting them into kind of the key finding, key recommendation format. So we just want to make sure the group is on board with what those look like. We'll cover some areas of dispute. If there's any kind of major disagreements or really minor disagreements in this document, we want to note those now, so that way the work group knows kind of what we're still working on getting consensus with, and B, it's just that'll kind of serve as our focus area for our subcommittee meetings moving forward, and frankly help us figure out how much more work we have to get this document to a place that we like. And then we'll go on to kind of discuss what drafting this document looks like from here. Any questions before we get started? Yeah, Sam.
It's more of just a comment. As a reminder, Ken sent in an email. It was either late last night or this morning with some comments on the RFP process that we should put on the agenda, because he can't make it this morning, and I don't want to lose that thread or suggestion.
Thanks, Sam.
I think it was about the specificity of the RFP, and was that a good idea or not?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So I added that as a comment into this document that we'll be working from today, and the goal is we'll hit these comments, make sure that that's being addressed to the group's liking. But we definitely don't want to lose that. It was a really good suggestion. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up this document then. Yeah, Marge.
Did you circulate the document that you're working from now so that we have something to refer to?
No, I obviously Ken just sent in his comment this morning, so I've added that to the document that I'm looking at.
But the document that you had before that, you didn't circulate that either, right?
This is the draft 3 that was sent out.
Okay, so that's what we're working from. We're working from the draft 3.
Yeah.
And you added Ken's comments in there somewhere. How did you do that? Was it at the end?
So I went to the RFP section that he was asking about, and then I just made a comment bubble on the RFP section and copied and pasted. I just said from Ken Eklund, copy and paste verbatim what he suggested. And the goal is that once we get to that point in the document, we'd say, oh, here's a to-do item from Ken.
Okay, and so that's in the main report, not in the appendix.
No, it is in the appendix. So the confusing piece of this is that we're going to be working from our subcommittee's report in the appendix of the larger report. And
good to know.
The goal is so that we don't have like multiple versions. The goal is so that we're basically we're at the point where we can have our subcommittee report embedded as the appendix of this larger document, and that will be our report that we're updating. So that way the main issue is the confusion of kind of copying, pasting our draft report into this. I
apologize. Yeah. I did not understand that from what your previous comments were.
Yeah, no, thanks, Marge. Don't apologize. I'm still wrapping my head around it. This is like a brand new. We're trying to navigate what this process is going to look like now that we're at this stage in the kind of drafting and development. So yeah, the goal is to not copy and paste and try to clean up the document. The goal is to work from this main document that everyone sees. Everyone's going to see our edits, comments, red lines, everything. So that's where we're at. So we're going to be in the process of making this kind of draft 3 version a little bit messier and a little bit more drafty, I guess.
Okay, so then after this meeting, any comments that we have will go into that that report in the appendix in the same way that Ken Eklund's comment made its way in. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yeah. So when folks are sending over comments to me saying, hey, let's add this to the report, in the meantime, the goal is we're going to put these comments into the report as suggested by each individual. Let's say you send in a revision to one section. We'd copy and paste that into the report. And then the next time we meet, we'd go through each of these new changes and say, hey, Marge added this section. What do you all think? And then the group says, yeah, we like that, or hey, we would like that change. So we'll go through the list for each recommended change, each meeting, essentially. All right. Any other questions? So we got ahead to how the drafting process will work, but this is a really good, important conversation because it's new and we're navigating it. Hey, John.
Sorry I'm late.
No, thanks for being here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and dive into this document. Okay. Does everyone see the SMMP document on the screen here? Okay, awesome. So let's scroll down here. So just so you know, because this was from the draft 3 that we all saw, that was sort of a cleaned up version. We removed the comments. If there is like red lines for words that were replaced with other words, we didn't have this in the clean version. So I'm working on essentially taking all of our comments and suggested edits from our like messy document that we've been working on, and just making sure that they're all captured in here so nobody is kind of losing track of those. But I've gotten a fair amount done this morning. I was able to capture most of the kind of main changes. If anybody sees anything that we still need to work on, let me know. I'm skipping over this table of findings and table of recommendations. We're going to come back to this shortly. These are all just copy and pasted from the findings and recommendations that are kind of sprinkled throughout this document. And the goal is we'll be reviewing this meeting and making sure that the group agrees and they all look good. We have our charge at the top here. That we're all very familiar with. This is the first section that from the last meeting that the group essentially asked Sean and I to work on. And this is essentially an introduction and the sort of, what's the gist of what we've been talking about this whole time. I think Marge had a fair amount of feedback in this piece, and this was the attempt of Sean and I to capture that. A lot of this is copy and pasted from Sean's sort of discussion on our group's work product so far during the work group meeting. So I wanted to capture this first and see if anybody had thoughts or suggestions on changing the recommendation, adding content. We want to make sure that we're capturing the goal. And this is the goal here is really to sum up what we've been talking about. What's the direction that this SMMP process has taken so far? Yeah, Marge.
Okay, I really like that you added these comments about circular economy as I mean, this is what we aspire to for our sustainable material management plan, which is supposed to look forward 15 years into the future, or some number of years that this plan would come to fruit, where we take steps to this would be the culmination of the steps that we take from where we are to where we want to be. I just have one thing, one comment about it. I would, although I agree with the how do you say, yeah, where this is coming from, celebrate innovation and shared prosperity. I would use another word besides celebrate, and just because it's a little bit unusual in a business document. And it's not that I disagree with that, I do.
Thanks, Marge. Any suggestions on a good replacement word for this? From anyone?
Maybe encourage.
That sounds good.
Or you could even do like recognize. Encourage is great too, but a recognition.
And that could be two pieces. They're similar, but they have different connotations too. So we could say encourage and recognize. What do we think of that? Thing nods. Okay. Well, for now, I'm gonna delete this. Perfect. Any other thoughts on the introduction? The big highlighted portion here is from Ryan, but the idea of the why, like really using this introduction to capture the why, and I think we're getting there. But I thought this was a really great suggestion, and I just wanted to highlight it that, I think this is still what we need to be working towards with the goal of this introduction. And I wanted to kind of build on that and see if we had any thoughts. Yeah, John. Oh, yeah, John.
Yeah, I think that, Ryan, I think that's a great thought. Yeah, the why is so important. So my thinking on that is that we give a little context. I think we could just say that something to the effect of the traditional approach to managing materials and in the county and beyond, perhaps, is an end of life approach, and talk about the challenges. I think we have to put the dinosaur in the living room, which is the kind of what got us to start talking about this a little bit more was the landfill's limitations, both environmentally and economically, and that the reason for the document is to chart expectations and aspirations for a longer range vision that will guide the county towards more sustainable materials management.
Wow, John, you just did that off the top of your head. I thought it was excellent.
Oh, okay. I'm winging it.
Sam and then Marge.
A couple of things. I'm sorry, I'm a little behind. I have to multitask today for other issues with BCTT. Going back to the inclusion of equity considerations and shared prosperity, a couple things. Some of my other clients are actively using the term shared prosperity, and it is associated with equity. That how you implement equity is, you have shared prosperity. And because the county has their new DEI person, I would, if you have time, drop a note to her saying, here's this section, we want to get the proper vernacular, because I think equity and shared prosperity are tied together, but I don't know how the lexicon is being used at the county. And I think we should dot that I and cross that T if we can. second piece, because I probably will have to go during this, and so I just wanted, there was a mention by Marge of, what is the out year for projections for the SMMP? And do you have a piece in the current report that that says, in our draft scope, that the out year is X that we're going forward to? And what is that out year?
Thanks, Sam. So I think we talked a bit about it, and I think the reference was 2040. So that puts us at 17 years, I guess,
Okay,
from now.
that's fine. You don't have to find it, but it's a predicate to the next piece. So at the Planning Commission meeting last night, one of the commissioners, I can't remember her first name, I think it was Lee is her last name, said some things that, frankly, because I was brain dead, didn't quite track, and I want you to consider being responsive to it. And it relates to the SMMP in this out year. And I'll try to do it justice, but in essence, she said something like, I'm concerned that this SMMP focus could be misleading to some members of the public, because let's assume, we have the greatest SMMP and implementation in the history of civilization. The reality is we are only able to influence the behaviors of Benton County folk with our SMMP. And since only 10% of the waste is coming from Benton County, if we just knock it out of the park, well, maybe then we reduce our share to 5% of the issue. And so what does that really mean? And then one of the other commissioners, it may well have been the chair or the co-chair or vice chair, whatever he's called, said something about, how can we, as part of the CUP, which I know is not your task, but as part of the process, get Republic to force, encourage, cajole, whatever the right word is, the other counties that are bringing trash in to do our SMMP behaviors that will reduce it to a stage where the 90% of waste that's coming in from other words will have a similar reduction. And I just don't want you guys to I wanted you to hear that and consider it, because that came up. And Marge, is that a fair summary of what they were saying, or add to it so I didn't?
It's an excellent summary. It's exactly the point I wanted to bring up. And no. You certainly, you used more words than I would have, but you said it very, very well. Yes, I mean, I thought that was a very, very important point. She brought it up twice. And that is exactly what I was going for with talking about a 15-year horizon for this SMMP. To explain to people that, yes, right now, anything we do means almost nothing with respect to the landfill. But this is aspirational. We're looking forward 15, 20 years. It's going to take us that long to get there. But and when we are, hope to heaven that the landfill is closed, and we have to I see that a lot of our SMMP work is, how do we prepare for that landfill to be closed, and what are our options when that happens, and how can we today start taking positive steps towards positioning ourselves so that at the end of 15 years we can be in the best possible position to handle waste and materials and whatever in our community, in the most environmental and sustainable way possible, which is what so many of our residents are thirsting for. I mean, there are so many people in our community who really are willing to go beyond, above and beyond to make something like this occur. And so to me, I see the SMMP as a plan for those people to guide them.
Just briefly, I
Does
think,
anybody else feel that way?
yeah, thanks, Marge. I think briefly, I was also at the Planning Commission meeting last night, and I think Marge puts it pretty well. The main misconception that Commissioner Lee brought up is, hey, because this whole thing is about the landfill, why does this plan talk about reducing waste when Benton County's waste reduction doesn't impact the landfill? And that misconception is really rooted in SMMP is not about the landfill. The landfill is one small part of sustainable materials management in the county, in the region, and the landfill certainly has an impact on that. But the idea, which I think is a really good one that we should be addressing in this introduction perhaps, is that the landfill isn't the topic. The landfill isn't the focus. We're talking about sustainable materials management and planning for reducing the impacts across the board, across the life cycle. And so that's just one thing I think we should address and kind of take away from that recommendation from Commissioner Lee.
Yeah. Can I just add a little bit on, and that takes time. That's not going to happen in a year. And so we need to kind of build that into people's expectations, that we have a step-by-step plan to get.
Yeah, thanks, Marge. And John, sorry for cutting you off there.
No, I am enjoying the commentary on this, and Sam and Marge, thank you, because one thing Sam said stimulated a thought in my head about how change happens, and it was in relationship to I guess one of the commissioner's comments that, or maybe it was just you, Sam, about what percentage Benton County is responsible for in relationship to the landfill. So I want to echo or support the points you've all just made about this is more than the landfill. But I also think that we need to acknowledge, and maybe it's in this introduction, that while Benton County has only control, direct control or influence over, let's say the most influence over its own residents' processes for managing waste, change happens through variety of ways, and within the timeframes we've been talking about, that change can happen with other counties, whether it be through creative franchise agreements, which was implied by Sam with the comment about doing something with Republic. It could be advocating for, or introducing ideas and things through the state legislature. It could be just setting a very positive example. We've looked to, when I was on SWAC, we were looking to Marion County and these other counties, and we get impressed by some of the things they do sometimes, and hopefully this will be a model that they can follow.
Thanks, John. Any other pieces on that? Commissioner Lee's comment from the Planning Commission last night? Yeah, Sam.
I also, in this part, I probably won't nail, but she basically said that if, depending on the context and how it's presented, that the county has two conflicting motivations. One is reducing the SMMP, reducing the trash, but the other is they get paid a tipping fee or whatever it's called, franchise fee for that, and maybe a sentence or two that talks about, you know, the economic, I don't know if the word's conflict, but the tension between those two potentially competing things. And I'm not suggesting we resolve it in the moment, but think about it. And I think it's worthwhile putting in the introduction so that, you know, we're upfront about it, because A, I think it's correct, and B, we want to be responsive to the feedback we're getting, which was very helpful last night.
Thanks, Sam. I'm just capturing that here so we don't lose it.
Hey, Daniel,
Yes.
from Sam's, from that comment, I respect it, obviously, but I'm curious if that note should be in another work group's introduction. I mean, what I'm hearing is that this isn't about the landfill, and then we're going down the rabbit hole of the landfill. And I'm just seeing that. I'm not dismissing the point. I think it's a really good point, but I'm curious if that could be in one of the other work groups, so that, you know, I love that statement. This is, the SMMP is not about the landfill. It's about the process, period. If that other comment is about the conflict, which I agree, maybe that's more germane in another work group. That was a question, not a recommendation.
I have one possible way to address this, and that might be perhaps adding a question in the RFP kind of subjects to be covered section that is worked into, you know, this outcome, this plan that we're hoping to initiate, and that could be essentially the analysis of conflicting or potentially conflicting concepts of, you know, waste reduction, driving waste to the landfill down, and really disposal down generally. And I think that fits squarely within the SMMP, but that existing conflict potentially regarding the funds that flow to the county from the landfill. And I think we've kind of been dancing around this a bit, but I think that's something that we could include as part of our suggested subjects to be covered, and maybe having the consultant dive into that a bit, and maybe even a plan for how to address that moving forward.
Totally down with that approach. I think that's really great. Thank you.
Anybody else have thoughts on that? Should we add that to the subjects to be covered? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and add that to the subjects to be covered. All right, so let's go ahead and move along. We'll go back up to where we were at. Oh, sorry. So we just finished up the introduction. We got kind of started diving into some of the other pieces here. We included a how to read this document. Generally, let me know if there's any suggestions on improving that. But I think it was going to be helpful for people to understand, you know, what's coming, how we broke this down, especially because we sort of rearrange how everything falls. It's not strictly in order of the charge anymore. It's sort of grouped by type of content. So now we're at the point to sort of, as a group, go through and sort of approve the introduction. This isn't the final approval, but this sort of stamps our changes that we made, so we can start building from this, so that this isn't, you know, a red line version anymore, and we can start building off of this. So generally, do we like the additions that were made and the progress we're making here so far? Can I resolve these comments? Yes, Sean. Oh, a thumbs up. Okay. Seeing thumbs up. Any concerns about resolving these comments? Yeah, March. Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was saying goodbye to Sam.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm gonna resolve this one. I'm gonna leave. Well, I'll resolve this one. The business wording, I think we captured that pretty well. And the good thing about resolving them is we can come back to them. We can reopen them if needed. I'm gonna leave this one for the EDI coordinator. I think we still need to figure that out. So I'll leave that as something for us to do. I'm going to resolve Ryan's additions for the work in progress and the introduction kind of piece above it. And then I'm going to resolve Sean and my kind of comments around the introduction piece around how the SMMP content started developing. All right, so now we're at the point where this introduction, we'll come back to this, build on it, change on it, but this is kind of no longer the red line version. This is the equivalent of accepting the track change on this, and this is kind of the process that will follow. We'll have a proposed change, and then as a group we'll go through and accept the track change. Okay, so now we're at Sustainable Materials Management Plan Development, and you'll see that this title right here, Development of a Sustainable Materials Management Plan, that is not the charge title. That's the one below, topics to be covered or topics covered in recent similar planning efforts. Before each of our sections were just the charge heading, but this is a goal to sort of group them all in a logical way so that the reader can look at this group, they can look at this title, oh, this all has to do with the development of the plan. And so we've grouped the charge elements that are associated under that title. So that's one suggestion that we made. How do we feel about that? Kind of grouping the charges by kind of logical readability, I guess. Does that make sense? Does it sound good? Is this a good section kind of way to divide it up? We've essentially divided for the development of the actual plan, so that the after an RFP is approved and kind of the RFP process is concluded, and then we dive into another section that's all about the RFP process. Okay, hearing none, seeing nods, we'll move on. Each section, generally, you'll see a paragraph. This was another kind of takeaway from our last meeting. The idea that we needed like introduction into each kind of piece, a narrative bit about what we did to approach this section. So this is a section that you've seen 100 times. This lists all the different plans that we've looked at having to do with solid waste management across the state. And then we just outlined this is born from a conversation Sean and I had, but it was essentially outlining what we did to review these documents and the topics that they covered and how we incorporated that into our own document. Any concerns? Do we like that approach?
Well, since we did it, I love it. I'm just
Thanks, Sean. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and accept this, hearing none. And then obviously, I just recommend any other suggestions on how to improve the wording here. Feel free to let's work on that in between meetings. We have a brief kind of transition into the outcome of this. So we reviewed all the topics to be covered, or all the topics covered in these other plans, and then we use that to inspire the questions that we want answered in our SMMP, as well as that table of contents in the appendix. So that's this just briefly kind of provides that transition. That's kind of the logical flow of this document that the reader can go through. I'll ask if we like that approach. Should I go ahead and accept this one? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and resolve this. This is a section that has been unchanged, so I'm not going to spend much time on it unless we have any suggestions for adding content here. I didn't get any suggestions to add. I know we had a comment above, actually, which I can go ahead and add, and that was essentially exploring the potential conflict between income from the landfill and reducing waste to the landfill. So I can add that now if that sounds good for the group, but I'm just opening the floor up for any other questions to be answered in the SMMP that we haven't already covered yet. Yeah, Marge.
Yeah, now, this set of questions, how does that relate to the table of contents?
Yeah, so I see them kind of, it is a question for this group, frankly, but I've always seen them as sort of almost a narrative concept behind the
Yes.
table of contents. And this list of questions, like there's pieces of the table of contents that are not covered specifically as a question, but I think this is sort of the focal point, the narrative. Yeah.
I just want to say that from my perspective, I so much prefer the layout of these questions to the table of contents to be put in an RFP. And the reason is that the table of contents, it kind of restricts the respondent to some formulated view of what their work should look like. And I think that's a mistake because we're hiring these people for their expert knowledge in just that, I mean, like not only in the responding to the items, we are wanting their expertise in formulating the context as well. And I think that stating the items in a question format so much more draws out the kind of creativity that we are paying $500,000 for than a pre-formulated table of contents. That's my opinion. That is my opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Marge. I think that was certainly something that I feel like we got from the conversations that we've had about this. My approach to that was putting the questions front and center in the document and putting that table of contents in the appendices, so that way we're capturing it. But really, the main event here is the questions. I think that's where my head was at. So I agree. I definitely am getting that from our conversations. Any other thoughts on that? Or this section, if there's any notes that you had to add or change these questions at all? This is a good one too to review in between meetings if you haven't had a chance. Just going through, we took our best shot, staff did, at putting these questions together based on our conversations and the table of contents. But yeah, please feel free to suggest any wording changes or additions, subtractions, anything like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. I'm gonna, just as a process piece, I'm gonna leave this as a red line edit here as a track change. And then in our next meeting, we'll go through and approve it. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, sorry, can't hit buttons fast enough, but sorry for joining late, but getting in on the kind of the comments that were made regarding the commissioners and kind of that struggle that was mentioned about kind of the fees that are received in the franchise agreement, right? Is there something in here that we need to mention, having that looked or reviewed in the master plan, in the sense of, and again, I don't know the context from the commissioners, but if they're looking for some form of a revenue stream from solid waste, could that be an analysis that's done within this to say that kind of alleviate that perceived pressure that the commissioners brought forward? Does that make sense?
I think so. If anybody has any thoughts on that, feel free to chime in. I think it makes sense, but essentially trying to incorporate that piece into maybe the questions to be answered. Is that the idea? Yeah,
and I think because I know that Lane County does it different than Benton County does. I know Marion County does it different than Lane or Benton. I mean, there's different ways to extract money from the solid waste system to benefit, like an SMMP, right? As to move recycling forward or reduction forward, and other mechanisms. That is, should there be an evaluation of that as a decision point for future for the board? Or, is there a way to call that out since the commissioner brought it forward last night? Is that something that we should have somebody address, right? Not necessarily just the one that was brought forward, but is there other ways that we could educate everybody in Benton County and the commissioners on ways to do that?
So I'm kind of typing in a question here in this section, and I think the idea that I had based on your comment was, what options and what evaluations or what options should there be to use landfill funds to support waste reduction efforts in a different way? Is that kind of the?
Yeah, and I would even step it not to even specific landfill funds as much as solid waste funds, because this could be a portion of the collection. It could be, more facets of that system. Kind of the point is, this isn't, we don't want to make this landfill centric, but we want to make it more of that global system componentry of, if for some reason this goes away, is there another way to still have those funds available to support, the system, if that makes sense.
So I'll add for systemic longevity here.
Yeah.
Do we think that this captures Brian's point well? Is there any other thoughts or suggestions on that? Sorry, it's a little bit small. Let me zoom in here. Yeah, Marge.
Yeah, I would ask Brian, does that capture what you were saying?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I don't know how to phrase it in kind of one sentence that way, but I think so. I mean, it's
What would you
something-
say as well?
I don't know. And again, it's how you directing this consultant to kind of go down this, piece that I know from a solid waste manager, right, that this administrative enforcement section is really critical to how I can do my business, right, and how I can function. What Marion County does is we've got a very small collection franchise fee, right? It's 3%. Most jurisdictions are 7%. But what we choose to do is to operate the scale houses at most of our facilities, where we set the pricing from county, and then in a sense we are allowed to take a portion of those proceeds to fund our waste reduction efforts, our household hazardous waste facilities, cover costs of other contracts in the system. I believe Lane County literally takes that number right off the top. I think Metro's similar, they take $30 right off the top. So it's just a way to do it, to the point of the commissioner saying, hey, we're concerned because we have this thing in a landfill that provides us millions of dollars a year, and this is our struggle. Is there some way to replace that within the system that's beneficial? So that, sorry, I'm not too good at this, but
Yeah.
because
Well,
I think that's part of your struggle, your commissioners, is they don't want to give away, and pardon the phrase, a cash cow, right, of dollars that they need for whatever they're using it for. Can a consultant at least do an evaluation to open up ideas of another way to do that?
yeah. But the other thing is, what I have heard is that franchise fee originally was supposed to do exactly what you're talking about, which is the franchise fee was supposed to help the county improve the process of handling solid waste. And somehow that franchise fee got put into general funds.
Yep.
Yeah.
That tends to be some of the case. There's a lot of jurisdictions that tend to get into that. They see a large pot and it starts getting pulled into a lot of other directions other than where it should have stayed focused.
Yeah. So it'd be great to put something in here to get that back on track, or at least highlight the fact that this is how other counties handle the situation.
Yeah, so Thanks, everyone. So, John.
I was thinking another way of wording this, if I think I get Brian's meaning, is more open-ended. How will the county fund ongoing sustainable materials management in the recommendations in this plan? Something like that. Considering that funds could come from exactly what he said, what you said, Brian, which is you tinker with the landfill disposal fees, and that, or there may be other sources. The new Modernization Act calls for producers to have more stake in the game. So that could be a source, but I think the overall gist of what you're saying, the way I took it, is, we want the county to place a priority on this, and so we need an answer, maybe not the answer from the consultant, but a range of options that are best practices or best policy practices.
Yep. Or an evaluation of what others are doing, just to provide light to that. Yep.
Right.
Thanks, John. So I have, I'm tracking this down here, and I'm gonna try to, I'll ask the group in just a moment if this captures what we're looking for, and Brian, feel free to dive in and just make sure that we're getting it right. And then I think we should also note John's potential recommendation here of, is this subcommittee recommending sort of a direction for funding and exploring funding options that maybe we should capture as a key recommendation somewhere. So I just want to note that, but go for it, Sean.
I just a minor little words, how will the county fund and or support? I mean, there's other ways that we can leverage our either partnerships or whatever it is. It's not always about funding. That's my number one. But I really appreciate these two strongly. Specifically systemic longevity, how can we support these plans that it might need incubation or some things from the county to get those going. So I think there's a really great points to put these. I'll defer if that's an official recommendation or in there, but I just think those topics and the way you're phrasing this and its questions are great.
Thanks, Sean. And John.
Yeah, I think just to answer your question, Daniel, that I think our charge is not to put any recommendations for how the county should generate funds. I think that's ultimately the decision of the county management and commissioners. But I think what we were asking for is that the plan include options to consider.
Excellent. And we do have a recommendation currently referencing this list of questions to be answered, basically recommending that this list of questions be the list to be answered in that document. So we're not losing that. I just wanted to make sure I don't want to miss that opportunity if that's what you're suggesting. So I guess, should we go with this last option here? How will the county? Oh, go for it, Mark.
Yeah, an evaluation of other options. Isn't it just an evaluation of options, of funding options? Or did I get that wrong?
I mean, I think that sounds good to me. Does that
Okay.
work for everyone?
Yep, I think that captures your current mechanisms and then also hopefully some others that the consultant would bring forward.
Excellent. And so do we like this last question better? We can replace the previous version of it here with what we drafted at the end.
Except for, I would strongly recommend that systemic longevity language be somewhere. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. I'm really sorry, everyone, just being a sustainability guide, systems are everything. So just to specifically highlight that in here.
Maybe I can tack that back on the end just as a
That's cool.
kind
I'm
of
sorry, that's cool
overall
with me.
goal.
Thank you.
All right. So hearing nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this other piece here. I just don't want to lose those comments. The tricky thing about all these comments is when you delete the word that they're associated with, the comments get deleted. So yeah, it gets a little bit tricky. Okay. So we have those. I think that looks excellent. Thank you all for diving in. That was one piece that, our enforcement administration section has been pretty, limited and pretty kind of run of the mill. So I think these are really the good times to be incorporating these suggestions. So we're capturing that. So thank you. Okay. Anything else for the subjects to be covered section? Excellent.
So I guess, quick, Daniel, are we asking for recommendations from a consultant? Are they gonna, I mean, in a sense, in the RFP, are we wanting them to come up with, after they do, and they basically answer through these questions, are they going to give you kind of that set of recommendations to move forward with? Are you asking for that? I mean, that's something that's been pretty standard in our master planning process, and that becomes kind of either the acceptance from the board and a guiding light for the future, or what are you thinking?
I know we noted recommendations specifically in many of these. So in my mind, I think the group is leaning towards like an analysis and recommendation for kind of each major question. So that's certainly where I was leaning, and maybe we can capture that a little bit better if that's what the subcommittee is hoping for. Yeah, let's go to Ryan and then Sean.
So I guess just for clarification, then, in the RFP, we're intending to select a contractor or consultant that will be providing recommendations for Benton County based upon this, based upon, because it's going to take a fair amount of work to do this, and they're going to get paid to do this work. Just again, for the intent of things, or are we looking from a selection standpoint that you're kind of fishing for ideas and picking the consultant that has the best idea? I just want to make sure we're really clear about that. I've seen it both ways, and so I just more of a clarifying question.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Sean.
I guess I'm curious. I want to make sure that my expectations are correctly grounded. My thought was that the consultant is going to lead an exercise, not like they're just going to go off in a corner by themselves and just give us a report in 6 months. My understanding was that that's where we have the who's at the table thing, that the consultant would be somewhat like Sam and guide a group. I think that I'm hearing right now that we're asking this consultant to just go in a corner and do this for us. Can I get clarity on what we're actually asking this entity to do?
Yeah, go for it, Brian.
I guess my 2 bits to that is, no, I'm assuming that there's public engagement, there's county staff engagement, there's SWAMAT or SWAC, there's all of these other entities, key stakeholders, right, that are helping explore all these questions, provide answers. And then I think back to that point is that I don't want them to provide that in the RFP, their recommendations. No, this is after all this work is done. They're just going to be kind of pulling it all together. And then there's this kind of synopsis in a sense at the end of this would be the recommendations from all of this stuff as a go forward for the SMMP.
Just wanted to be crystal clear. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was my,
Yeah, I thought the same thing, Brian. John.
I agree with that too. I think it's a combination of both. I think it's with heavy on the engagement part, because we want empowerment of the population to be fully behind this plan, or at least a majority of people, so it succeeds.
I just want, because some of this language I'm reading as the consultant will answer these questions. I just want to be crystal clear that in these recommendations, either in the intro or somewhere, that the commissioners are not in any way, shape, or form insinuating that we're suggesting that. So I'm in complete, it's not an agreement. We have to be doing public engagement. Just want to be upfront with
Yes.
that process. So sorry to derail you.
Can we get that word engagement in that sentence?
So I don't know if you're seeing my track here.
Oh, you got it. Okay, and
so-
you put it in. Excellent. Okay, and the other thing is public and stakeholder, and an entity like SWAC is kind of not either one of those, and yet it's a really important entity in the process. So I'd feel better if there were more of a reference to that level of stakeholder. I mean, you could say that it's a stakeholder, but it's a special kind of stakeholder. It's an actual state mandated function.
I added that here. Yeah, Brian.
And again, sorry coming in late to the meeting, but do we need to spell out that kind of an intent as direction amongst, even before the questions of our expectation of the winner of the RFP is you will be doing stakeholder engagements and to literally answer all of these questions that are listed. Make sure that they understand that fundamentally to the point is we're not going to let them go hide in a corner and try to answer these without having Benton County residents and businesses and everybody else engaged in these conversations.
So I'm thinking about maybe capturing this in two places. So in the sort of RFP, what is expected of you section that I was just taking a note in. I captured that comment before, but I think to Brian's point, leading into this questions to be answered, it might be worthwhile saying, just for context here, these questions to be answered, you should be considering an evaluation, a recommendation after robust outreach to all the folks that we've mentioned in this plan.
Yep.
Does that sound good? And
then literally that next sentence would be, how are you going to do this? That would be what you would want them to bring forward in the RFP is how are they going to do that engagement? So that would be part of your scoring methodology and everything else so that everybody said, yeah, I like the idea or nah.
I'm just going to briefly try to capture this here. Sorry, might take me just a moment.
I think while you're doing that, somebody made a comment earlier about hopefully somebody taking good ideas. And I can tell you as the solid waste person for Marion County, I am loving the fact that Benton County is doing all this work because I most likely will be plagiarizing every bit of it going forward for our plan updates.
It's a back and forth with all the Marion County stuff we picked apart already. So thank you.
You're welcome, Brian. You're welcome.
It all comes out in the
always appreciate it.
It all comes out in the wash, I think.
Mm-hmm. Very helpful. So this group is doing great work.
So I'm just capturing this. How will the applicant address this here? This probably should not go in this paragraph, but in the RFP kind of outline. But I just really like that is logically that's what we're getting to. How are you going to approach that? So I just want to make sure we're capturing it, not losing it.
Kind of what's your outreach plan?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. I will try to find a better spot for that question. All right. Anything else for subjects to be covered? Excellent. Okay. So we have this 2040 Thriving Communities Initiative and related county documents with similar county's reference. So this is from our charge. We looked at this. Basically, one of the first things we did as a subcommittee, we got this nice kind of broad paragraph. The only thing we did here was summarize that paragraph. The issue before is in our key recommendation, we really just didn't have it summarized very well. So we did our best to kind of summarize this piece. And generally all the recommendations to follow, we tried our best to summarize the content so that with the goal of work group members who are going to be polling on these recommendations, they should know what they're recommending. They should know the gist, and they'll have a link in their document to go to the full kind of discussion around this item for more context. So did our best. Let us know if there's any corrections or adjustments that you want to make here.
If
Yeah, Mark.
that's a key recommendation, then can we add that about engagement in here? If that's a key recommendation?
Yeah, definitely. Where do you think that would best fit in? Obviously, we're in a new section here, but I think maybe underneath the section above, we could have a key recommendation about that analysis or recommendations should be based on analysis and extensive engagement.
I mean, honestly, that we have that is phenomenal.
John.
I think on that, I agree with the engagement suggestion. But I was talking about what we were discussing before. Can you go back down after you do
Yes.
that? Oh, not that one, the key recommendations. Oh, where we say in that first sentence of recommendation 1, sustainable materials management framework. I think that's important, and we might want to reference something like either Oregon DEQ's version of it or EPA's version of it, but something to point to that we're supportive, that we all agree with, because there's different different interpretations of that statement.
Yeah, the definition and kind of supporting documentation here. That's a really good point. We also got that feedback from the work group as when we're calling out these different frameworks, like circular economy is defining them. So if anybody wants to take a stab at that, feel free. I'm also happy to try to find something, but I think that's a really good point. I did get a comment from another subcommittee member saying that they were going to send us their kind of proposed definition list for all the things that we're talking about. So we might be getting that in as well from them. But feel free to send over anything you want to help describe these. I think adding links to that supporting documentation would be helpful. I don't want to lose what Marge just said. Sorry, go for it, Marge.
Yeah, well, yeah, but why aren't you putting it in the key recommendations section? Isn't that a key recommendation?
So
that
key
we-
recommendations aren't a section. They're sprinkled throughout the document in each section. And then at the end, we just copy and paste all those at the very top to the
Okay, do we
the
have
table
one?
of
And do we have a key recommendation then that really homes in on this concept of participation with the community?
Off the top of my head, I would have to double check. I think the best thing we can do is capture it here as a key recommendation in the text, so that way we can not lose it. I don't want to assume that we have it somewhere that we don't. It's better to have it twice than not at all.
I agree. I just don't know why it's not a key KF something or a KR or something like that.
Sorry, I just don't have the numbers. If you want, I can call it KF.
Oh, but you're saying it'll eventually get down there.
Yeah, or KR. Yeah, I mean the intent of writing the recommendation is that it would that's what it would be, a key recommendation. But I'll put KR here just so we know is not.
That's what our intention is, that become a key point.
Yeah. I just don't want to assign a number to it. That's not the right
Okay.
number, I guess.
got it. That word engagement isn't in there. Extensive engagement with and it's not from, but with the community, in my opinion. Okay.
All right. How does that look?
I would just take out feedback. I would just say an extensive outreach and engagement with community stakeholders.
Any other thoughts on that?
And maybe community stakeholders reference our list, the list of who should be around the table.
Yeah, and including institutions like SWAC, DSAC. Yeah.
Yeah, Sean.
I might, just being an insider, respectfully recommend not doing that. So I'm thinking of NRAC, which is our environment and natural areas. I'm afraid if you start picking one or two, it's going to either focus, and we have tons of other conglomeration of whatever you want to call it. We have natural areas park. We have all these different that I think are germane to this topic. And I think if we're going to pull one or two specifically out, it might insinuate not engaging others that do have a pony in this race. So I think I like the stakeholders, link it to who should be at the table, and then in that list, put in SWAC or just say governments, advisory groups, or something vague like that.
Yeah, I get your point. The reason why I'm saying this about SWAC and DSAC is because it is a real advisory group. Its job, part of its charter, is to deal with issues like to deal with things at the level of an SMMP. We've been dealing with it in our meetings, for a year. It's been on our agenda. And I think it's in a slightly different category than a citizens advisory council that is put in place by the city of Corvallis, say. SWAC and DSAC DSAC is actually state mandated.
Yep.
Entity.
Marge, just to clarify, DSAC and SWAC are like the exact same level as any other county advisory group, regardless of if they're state mandated. And I think to Sean's point, just capturing that, for instance, other advisory groups have had SMMP on their agenda, not just SWAC and DSAC.
Okay.
So
Okay.
maybe capturing that by adding in the who should be at the table section, county advisory groups that relate to this topic or something, that opens up the door for maybe there's another advisory group that's created that also might want to be at the table that we can't capture here because they don't exist currently. So I just wanted to clarify, and Sean, I don't want to speak for you, but I
Daniel, you nailed it. No, I nailed it. We also have an internal health and all actions committee. We have an internal equity committee. We have, there's a lot of county groups that we have stood up that are piercingly germane to this topic. Once we get away from just the Covenant Butte, we're talking, once we get away from that, you're opening up from cradle.
I get that point. Now, I understand that is something that I was not appreciating it though. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate you raising that, Mark. So if what I'm hearing you, Daniel, is just putting that in our list of who needs to be at the table and just put in government advisory groups and that kind. Is that where we've landed?
I think so. Does that sound good to everyone else?
The thing, what I would say though is solid waste advisory committee does sound, or a council does sound, you know, like it's more targeted to this issue than but I do understand what you're saying, and I'll yield.
Okay. All right, so I've added government advisory groups relating to the subject matter. Said government instead of county because, to Marge's point, you know, like City of Corvallis does a ton of work around this, so maybe you know, leaving that door open as well, to being inclusive of other groups that are within Benton County's watershed that might be working on this.
I think that's really great. I mean, I'm even thinking of Frana and others. So I think this really helps from the county's perspective to be as open and as engaging to as many partners as possible. So thanks, Marge.
I think that's true, but I also do think that, and I will say SWAC and DSAC because it's what I'm familiar with. I think that's at a different level, say, than restaurants or architects.
So you're thinking just putting them higher on the list? Is that what you're?
Well, yeah, at least putting them higher on the list. Yeah.
There's certainly, I mean, if we're talking like here under small cities, I don't, first of all, I don't think that this list is prioritizing anyone. So I think moving it might, you know, functionally, I don't think is doing much, but if it makes us feel like we're sort of capturing that this is, you know, first thing you see, yeah, I'm happy to move it. But yeah, I think this list doesn't prioritize groups, and maybe that's something we should include here, because I think that could be confusing. So I guess two questions. Is it okay to move this? And should I add a note here that this list isn't prioritized? Seeing nods. Any concerns about that?
Definitely not this prioritized. I like that.
Okay. Okay. I think we're making a lot of progress here. We have about 11 minutes left of the meeting. Let's break from where we're at now. We're going to go to the key findings and key recommendations for about 5 minutes. And we're basically just going to go down the list and see if let's try to focus on the kind of bigger picture of does this generally capture what we're talking about, and then instead of wordsmithing, I guess, just for sake of time. So these are the ones that we've captured so far, not including the ones that we just added. So that key recommendation that Marge mentioned earlier, we have that in the text. I'll copy and paste it up here, but this is just kind of summarizing everything. So far we have 5 key findings, so many fewer key findings and key recommendations. So the first one is many best practices and model SMMPs exist in Oregon and beyond, and that was drawn from our analysis of the different solid waste management plans that we looked at. I'll just go through them and then we can talk about them as a group. The charges of the BCTT work group are intimately related and will be included within the RFP. The contracting out processes often included TAC, a technical advisory committee, which vet technical information from a consultant and get to a place of consensus, and a community advisory committee, which provide review in the technical experts areas of disagreement. So that was feedback from Sam.
Ryan, is that your understanding as well these days?
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you utilize it, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's a I'm not that familiar with that practice, but I think it's
Yeah.
excellent to have it.
Yep, and again, I assume that this will be something the board will take applications or assign or whatever people into these groups, right?
When we say Community Advisory Committee, that's what we're thinking then, that the Board of Commissioners will designate or form a new committee that is targeted at this SMMP process? Is that what we're thinking?
Well, I think generally that, so we have a more expanded kind of RFP associated recommendation that goes into what the feedback from the community and stakeholders should look like. And I think that recommendation is essentially setting up a community advisory committee that consists of a bunch of different stakeholders to help guide the RFP process.
Okay, so you think it's defined somewhere else, that this Community Advisory Committee is the composition of it is defined somewhere else?
I think generally, I think we reference the list of stakeholders, but if there's anything you want to add here, we can capture it in a comment and just make sure we don't lose it.
No, I'm just wondering what we mean by that.
Yeah,
I think it can just be left open-ended. It's a community advisory committee, or it could be maybe written a advisory committee, which, just say an advisory committee, which provides review. This is kind of a observation one. It's not it's a
Yeah.
finding. It's not a recommendation.
Recommendation.
Yeah, Go for it, Mark.
Okay, and it's kind of understood that this is a Board of Commissioners function to convene such a group.
Yeah, I don't know if that's assumed here or presumed here. I think it's really just throwing it out there that this is what's been
That's
observed.
something that will be discussed and kind of fielded at some more appropriate moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and generally the key findings, these aren't recommendations. These are things that we've uncovered as we've done our work. So I can imagine we'll be adding to this. And the essence here is really for the work group to say, oh, this was a finding. I didn't know anything about community advisory committees, but now I know that they typically review technical expert areas of disagreement. And then when they get down into our section discussing, our recommendations around RFPs, they're like, oh yeah, we just had that finding on community advisory committees, and this is all starting to make more sense. So this is basically our opportunity to point out kind of key elements that maybe we, was less generally recognized leading into this process, and we're kind of building the reasoning for our recommendations, I guess. So I think we only have 5 here. We're going to be building on this hopefully a little bit, but this is where we really want to point out these kind of key areas. Yeah, Sean.
Only with because of limited time. I'm very curious on number 2. I never thought that. I mean, yes, CUPs. I'm doing our charge. We have a CUP work group and a legal work group and others. Yes, they're related, but it's not my understanding that we're going to have a consultant focus on those topics. And so that's why I'm like, it will be included within the RFP. I'm having difficulty foreseeing what a consultant helping us develop an SMMP would be with all the other charges of the BCTT work group as a whole. What am I missing, Daniel?
No, I think you're right, Sean. If I don't recall specifically, but I think when this came up, the discussion was about this group's charges and
Right.
saying, hey, everything in this group, in this subcommittee, the charges are so related that we're going to be including, like the RFP is going to likely be including all of these things. So I think BCTT work group should be replaced with SMMP subcommittee.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yes.
That's exactly right. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. We'll leave it as a track change, and then we'll go through and approve it next time. Okay, So we have the length of the overall project can be heavily impacted and defined by the level of public interaction engagement included in the project. And then the research and development of the plan can occur in the background, not using as much time as outreach. And that was all during the RFP discussions that we had. And I think the gist of the last one, it's a little bit confusing, but I think the gist of the last one is that the consultant doesn't have to develop this project in line. So it's not necessarily that the consultant stops all of their work while some phase of engagement occurs, but rather they might be getting engagement on one aspect of the work while they're also trying to determine how much waste was generated in the county. So I think the idea was going into the timeline. Yeah, John.
This is just wordsmithing, but I think actually it's more than that. Why not just say a little more clearly the research and development aspects of the planning process may occur or can occur concurrently
Yes, yes,
with
the outreach,
with
but not
with-
staying as much time as
with public engagement. I think outreach is too general.
public engagement. I agree. I like it.
All right. Thank you, John.
Yeah,
Thanks for helping
I
us
think that is-
sift through that one.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So let's come back to this. We're pretty low on time here. I'm going to ask us to, for the next meeting, if you can go through the key recommendations and just go through, see if you have any concerns. We can focus on high level, but since the suggestions can come in offline, just send me an email. You can get as detailed as you want. But I just want to make sure that the next time we meet, we can be going through and basically saying, yeah, we like these findings. Yeah, we like these recommendations as they're written. Yeah, Sean.
How can we get this latest version? Will that be on the subcommittee page?
Yeah, so these files are unfortunately so big at this point with the full work group. So we're going to be putting these in a file sharing folder that you would essentially download. But I haven't done a ton of changes from our conversation today. So if you've already started to make edits to the draft number 3 that you've downloaded online, feel free to send me that and I can incorporate it. Or I should be sending out a link with this version of it probably sometime this week. The issue is that now all the subcommittees are going to be adding their changes to the same document. So I can't send it out as is without, the CUP's changes, for example, kind of incorporated in there. So I recommend kind of going through the document that exists at draft number 3. And
why can't you just put it as it is right this minute? Why can't you just put that out?
I potentially can. I mean, we're still figuring it out. The issue is that if it gets out there to this subcommittee, I think that potentially could work. The challenge is if let's say for those of you who are involved in multiple subcommittees, you're working from this document, but the other subcommittee piece isn't quite updated. It just gets a little complicated. So it's something we're still working through. So I'll do my best, but I'll communicate with the group how we're going to figure out getting this out. But yeah, it's unfortunately not an emailable file size as it is currently. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And I'm just going to address our last couple agenda items here. So our next meeting, I think, is probably the biggest piece that we should touch on as we're closing out the meeting. I wanted to basically get an item on our calendar for the next few meetings. The idea here is that we only have this month really to meet. I think the week of March 6th is the last time the subcommittees can meet before the work group is going to get their final draft and do the final polling. So I'm wondering if we should set up like weekly check-ins that we might be able to do shorter, or a couple check-ins between now and March 6th. I wanted to see how the group is feeling on that. If you want to do weekly, if you want to do bi-weekly, and then generally what days and times work. So first, how are we feeling? Do you think setting up a weekly check-in on these topics would be good, or should we go like every other week?
I think every other week, up to March 6th.
As long as we can get, I'm sorry, John.
Should be adequate.
I agree. As long as we can get, I just need time to review, and I really honestly, sincerely want to give you my edits, but I keep getting PDFs. And so whenever it's possible for you to give what you just had to us, then I could just do track changes and then we review every other week. I think I agree with John. That's just my approach.
Yeah, I mean,
Thanks, Sean.
if this is just a section, can't you just email us that section?
Yeah, let me figure it out with my team and see how it's going to work best. I think that's a very likely possibility, Marge. All right. So in the spirit of the 2 weeks, if we go out 2 weeks from today, we have the February 15th and March 1st. How do those days look for you, and would the 10:30 to noon time on the 15th and the 1st work for anyone?
We have our county's new hire orientation is from 9 to 12, and that's going to take at least me out and anyone else that does that, but I'm wide open afternoon.
Okay. So we got a couple thumbs up on the 15th and the 1st. We have Sean might be out and propose an afternoon time. Do we have afternoons on the 15th and the 1st available? Maybe
The 1st is open in the morning for me, but not that was and if I can't make it, I can't make it. So we'll
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good the morning of the 15th. Afternoons, I can't do afternoons on Wednesdays.
Okay.
you guys
Well,
go ahead. I can
right.
work with Daniel. You have that. Go for it. I can't attend a meeting. Oh, travesty. And I'll work with you, Daniel, and to give you that. And I am available on the 1st at this
Okay.
time.
Thank you, Sean. And Ryan, how does 10:30 to noon on the 15th and the 1st sound?
Yeah, I can make that work.
Okay, excellent. So we have everyone but Sean on the 15th. Sorry about that, Sean. We'll make sure to get your edits added to the document that we work from. And let's add that. I will send that out as soon as possible. My apologies for not getting that Outlook invite out. It's been a crazy week, and unfortunately I succumbed to the craziness. So I'll do my best to get that out very soon here. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for making the time today.
Thank you.